Today's episode is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Sounds in Cinema podcast. The Everything Sequel podcast contains explicit language, and I will not go to my room. We're talking Rocky IV. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, my friend, my boxing partner, my sparring partner, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Hit me, Tom.
You will lose. I have a question for you off the bat.
You kind of made that sound like Arnold.
That's my question. Do you think that casting Dolph Lundgren in this role was Stallone's way of having Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie without dealing with having Arnold Schwarzenegger in the movie?
I think I have a note here. Am I remembering something? No, maybe I'm remembering because I did. I've done Masters of the Universe.
Yeah, you're deep in Dolph.
Yeah, I'm deep into Dolph Lundgren. For one of these movies, Schwarzenegger trained him.
Okay.
For the movie.
Trained him in acting?
Yeah, no.
Because that's equally plausible.
That's totally plausible.
Because there were so many moments in watching this movie back where, you know, it's like the haircut, the way he's filmed, the way he speaks, the way his character is scripted, and the fact that Stallone cast Dolph Lundgren because he thought he had a punchable face. That this is Ersatz Arnie. Not to take anything away from Dolph Lundgren, who gives a...
So this is my question for you, though.
Gives a very striking performance that is all his own. I'm just saying, from Stallone's point of view, I wonder whether this is like...
Right.
I can have Arnie without dealing with
Arnie. Yeah. But one of the things that struck me on the viewing of this movie, I really tried to hone in on performances, and without saying almost anything, Dolph Lundgren gives a really strong performance.
Yeah,
he's a great villain.
There's maybe one or two moments where it looks like he has trapped wind, but beyond that, I think he's excellent. I think he's again, like, you know, we're coming off. I mean, this is not his debut, but pretty close, right?
Do you know what his debut is? That's my trivia question for you, friend.
Well, I know he's an out of focus background character in View to a Kill.
Yes. Okay.
You really think you were going to get that one past me?
Stand corrected.
Is there any world in which that would get past me?
I should have known.
You should have known, yeah. But
I am properly shamed.
But you know, this is like an early film for Lundgren in the same way it was an early film for Mr. T.
Yeah.
And it's definitely as impressed. You know, you have that same feeling of, who is this guy?
Right.
Like, what's he about? You know, like he's making very striking but very strange acting choices. And I think that's a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I don't want to watch the same performance again and again.
Right.
I love the fact that he's different and interesting, and, you know, you're curious about him as well as enjoying what he's doing on screen.
And beyond anything, he strikes me. He looks, everything that he does to me like smacks of a real athlete, like an actual professional athlete. That's what.
Yeah, I buy that.
You know, that's what I took away from this one. And then, like you said, there are little moments, and it's always when he's not speaking. I like, you know.
Yeah.
In that first round against Apollo Creed, when clearly that fight should have been stopped, but they ring the bell, and Rocky Balboa looks at him, and just the head shake he gives, like, how dare you have let that old man get in the ring with me?
Yeah.
It's really great.
I agree. Yeah, he's doing a lot with very little.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I completely agree.
All right, well, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about Rocky 4, a 1985 film directed once again by Sylvester Stallone. This would, however, Tom, be the last movie he directs until Rocky Balboa. And if you had
Yeah.
asked me that before we started this series, I would have thought there's no way that he would let all the movies he's done pass without his doing them himself. But uh, that's kind
Yeah,
of
but it's
remarkable
sort
to
of
me.
yeah. I mean, he's sort of for a few years following this, he's in very good hands directorially.
Mm-hmm.
Rennie Harlan and who did Demolition Man?
Ooh,
But you know, regardless, like he's working with good people.
right.
And then there's a period where he's not working with good people.
Yes.
And you know the films show that, but it's, you know, as we'll go on to discuss, when he comes back directorially as Rocky Balboa, you think, what, you know, wow, him directing his own movies makes a huge difference to the quality of them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's when we start to realize that, you know, maybe he's not a journeyman director, he's like closer to an auteur.
No wonder I couldn't remember the director of Demolition Man, Marco Brambilla, because I don't know who the fuck that is.
Okay, no, I have no idea. I have no idea who the fuck that is. But Demolition Man is one of the best movies of the '90s.
Yeah,
well,
I love that movie.
So,
Well, all right. So now let's take care of some business here. Rocky 4, we're starting to get into the land, Tom, sadly for me, because I list this as my second favorite movie in the series, but we're starting to get into the land of diminishing returns. 40% on Rotten Tomatoes, whereas... Critically, yeah.
Oh, fuck it. Fuck that.
Yeah.
I'm done with them. I've been done with them since... Was it Halloween? I think it
well,
was Halloween.
But it is a barometer for how critics have viewed this movie, because this movie was widely panned at the time.
But this one's always going to take a hit because it's stupid.
No, but it's still good.
I mean, anyone who's trying to argue this isn't a stupid movie is on a losing streak.
Yeah. They probably have gotten a little punchy themselves.
I think they're got that Rocky 5 brain damage.
Yeah, that comes and goes.
That completely comes and goes as is convenient to the plot.
As does his eyesight, as does his old age, as does his ability to fight
his age.
people
thought about that.
Who
His
are
age.
bigger and stronger than him. There's no end. However, this movie smash hit. He ups the budget for himself. Budget of $30 million, but an opening weekend of $19.9 million. In the USA, $127.8 million, and in the world, $300.4 million. And
how much do you think that budget was spent on dry ice? 15%, 20%?
Just for that one dream sequence? Or not dream, but you know what I mean.
No, I don't know what a dream sequence is in the context of this movie.
Yeah.
If you told me it was all a dream, I would say, sure.
As I've stated before, several times, I think, there's one of my notes is, this movie is 31.9% montages.
You've revised that figure since we
I think I rounded down before. I said 30.
You rounded down. I think you should round up. I think rounding up tells
32,
the story better than
right.
rounding down.
But the second half of this movie is 50% montage.
Well, my theory is
which is fucking amazing. Like, come on.
The movie is set in Russia, so it's his homage to the Eisensteinian montage cinema of the 1920s.
If you say so. But I think we've discussed before that Stallone is great at all of these movies, except I believe Balboa. I don't remember seeing something for Balboa. I'll have to look that up again. But he gives Rocky 4 7.5 out of 10. Stallone himself.
But we also reflected that must be an outdated figure because he clearly thinks less of it as of 2021 because we have seen him live talking about this movie within the past few weeks.
Yes.
And we should address that, should we not?
Yeah, I mean, so I think maybe we should do like a Halloween 5, shouldn't we?
Yeah.
Should we save that for the end?
Yeah, we should save that for the end, but just to make viewers aware that there is a very recent
there is a
director's cut of this movie.
Different cut of this movie.
That we have both seen, that we saw together.
Yeah.
In a movie theater that was preceded by a live interview with Stallone from Philadelphia.
Correct.
So we'll talk about that later on in the podcast.
And as I believe I remember you said, it was a unique experience having to watch that movie with me next to you in the seat, or rather in the seat next to you.
Well, it was like attending a sports event.
Yeah.
You weren't reacting to it as if it was a movie. You were watching it as if, very appropriately, as if it was a piece of, sports theater.
Yeah.
And I love it. I love that. And, in a way, I wish there was more of the original Rocky IV feeling in it, because then that reaction would be more justified.
Exactly.
But you were reaching for those kind of those showy moments that were still in the cut.
Well,
and they were still there.
And so let's talk about. I think it's time to talk about time in this movie.
Have you been putting it off as well?
Yeah.
Because I gave the last movie a pass on its timeline fudging.
Right. Temporarily, these movies are starting to... It's not as egregious as Rocky V, but we're starting to get into some shit.
It's pretty bad.
Yeah.
Because we're saying that 3 years is...
3 days. Yeah, I don't know. Like, the one thing...
Well, he just got back from the fight.
But what we don't know is the amount of time from his fight with Clubber Lang to with Apollo Creed.
Oh, that's true.
And I think we talked about it, in the last episode. I think we gave lip service to it.
It's not years, though, is it?
No, yeah. I think we said... I can't remember if we actually gave a time, but if we did, I'm sure we would have said there's no way it's longer than 6 months.
No, he's healed for sure.
Right.
He's healed, so there's a bit of a gap. But yeah, I don't I don't think it's long enough that it helps.
Right.
I think that's my answer.
So.
But, carry on.
Well, the one thing I'll give to Rocky 3 is they clearly say that he's had 8 title defenses, and they have a music montage at the beginning of that movie.
It should be 1980. I figured out. You could get away with it being 1980 because I have to be that generous to it, because I cannot conceive that the movie Rocky 3 takes place in the 70s. And I will not concede that that's the case. But it's conceivable it does. But we know factually it cannot.
Right. But
so we're already about 2 years ahead of ourselves, I would say.
I like, the thing is they make it seem like it hasn't been that much amount of time. Like you, I would never say that. I would actually say it's later than 1980. It might actually be 82.
But it's not. It can't. I did the math. I figured it out. It can't be. But it doesn't matter.
What do you mean?
Let's just say it's 1980, and it still kind of works.
Why can't it be?
Because of things they say that are too specific in that press conference about how much time has passed that they didn't need to say.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I didn't want to talk about that because I was like, okay, let's just say it's 1980. We can go on from there.
Right.
The big problem, I think...
I always thought of it in terms of, like, usually you're not going to have a fighter fight more than once a year. and he's had 8 title defenses. But there's no way it's been 8 years. So...
There's no way it's been 8 years, and there's no way that Rocky waits a year to have a fight at this.
So I was thinking maybe he's fighting every 6 months.
But
and that would work out, like 78 to 82.
Okay, let's say that then. It's not true, but let's say that.
All right.
But one of the huge problems here, timeline-wise, is that we're entering the world of geopolitics.
Yes.
Where timeline matters.
Yeah,
okay?
Exactly.
So we have to be in 85 because Mikhail Gorbachev
Because the entire world, is in 1985.
Mikhail Gorbachev was not chairman of the Russian Communist Party before 1985.
Exactly.
So he literally would not be in that position. Yeah, and, he arrived... So Rocky arrives home, like, a few hours after his fight with Creed. His son has aged several years.
Several, yeah. And not as egregious as the next movie.
No, it's even worse in the next movie. And you're starting to get the sense that one of the kind of key pleasures of the series, which is picking up directly after the last movie ended, is starting to compromise the series.
Right.
We need to move beyond that if we're going to make the timeline work, or the accumulation of it is going to keep us, in the early 1980s when it's like
so. But I think it's interesting because fairly recently we've done the Halloween series.
Yes.
And
speaking of rough timelines,
right? And we gave an awful lot of lip service to what Halloween 4 chooses to ignore, which is that the villain and the main hero, or one of the two main heroes, were blown up.
Oh yeah, sure.
And that they still managed to make it work within the narrative somehow, like through a miracle.
Yeah,
but like you're saying, this movie is choosing to ignore something within the last 2 sequels, but it does feel like it's compromising the movie a little bit.
It does if this movie were
anything other than ridiculous.
If this movie was attempting some degree of realism, it might be a bigger problem than it is.
You're right about that, yeah.
But we learn very early on in this movie that we're in another dimension now.
Right.
We're in an alternate reality.
Oh, I found my note. Arnold did train Lundgren for this movie.
Oh, there you go.
There you go.
To me, that seems like putting the cart before the horse. to use a later image from this movie, where we see both horses and carts.
Right. Used to.
But that's also fascinating. You could make a Rocky-like movie about Arnie training Dolph Lundgren for a Rocky movie.
Yeah, right.
With all the same dynamics, tensions.
Yeah.
It would play just as beautifully.
That's great. So this is going to the very beginning. This is the first time we're not really getting the inspirational music with the slow crawl of Rocky going across the screen. Instead, we have the slow gloves.
Well, you say slow, they then explode.
Right. So slow.
I'm going to say the slowness doesn't really matter if you explode.
Slow coming up and moving to the side, followed by quickly ramming into each other and exploding. And one's of course an American flag, and the other one is a Soviet Union flag.
Right. So we've taken the title, music, and footage from the previous movie, and we've added explosive patriotism.
Yes, right.
Which tells you everything you need to know about.
Right at the start of the movie, you have all the information for what this movie's going to be about.
And you get the sense for the first time that propaganda and fantasy are high on the list of priorities here.
Mm-hmm.
And that turns out to be more true than you could possibly imagine. But I'm going to say, like I've noted, I put in my notes that there's a lot of really good narrative choices up front in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
The first one being, and this might seem a foregone conclusion when you've seen all the movies together multiple times, but they have a choice here to make about whether or not they tell us who won the behind closed doors fight between Rocky and Creed.
Right.
And they make the right decision, which is to never tell us.
Until a later sequel. Or not, I don't know if you can count it as a sequel, but they reveal.
Oh, is it in one of the Creed movies?
Yeah, it's in one of the Creeds. The
I
first
blocked
one,
that out. That's a shame. But anyway,
but I think you're right. Yeah.
But I do wonder. Like again, I'm constantly trying to put my I don't need to. I could just ask you. What do I do? I want to put myself in the place of someone who saw this movie in the theater.
Yes.
I have Mike Shantz right in front of me. What am I talking about? Was this a disappointment to you?
No.
You thought it was the right choice even back then?
Even back then.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Because that's that's the way I've always felt about it, but I wonder if, it's like the Who Shot JR of the Rocky series.
But it's interesting you say that.
But we never found out who shot JR.
Right. It's interesting you say that because, I'm a teenager when this movie came out.
Yeah.
So I think maybe there's a part of me that feels moviegoer savvy to think that as a teenager even that was something that wasn't a disappointment.
No, that's impressive. I can imagine people be like, oh, what a scam.
Mm-hmm.
That's they made a promise to us.
You could imagine that there were people that walked out of the movie thinking it's like having seen Empire and going into Jedi and finding out nothing, like on that level.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm thinking of. But again,
not for me, and not even at the time.
It's the smart choice.
Yeah.
We're back to Secret Smart Guy. He has a very obvious choice in front of him, and he makes the.
And I do think you can,
one.
you can infer a little bit, because he's got the black eye.
Yeah, but he just walks into a ring and he gets a black eye.
Right.
It's like.
But I'm saying it's a choice where you could think, because he also has a line where he's like, "What happened to your face?" Where his son is questioning him, and first he asks him, "Where'd you get that hat?" And he said, "A friend gave it to me." And he said, "Who hit you in the face?" He says, "Same friend." And just something in the performance of Stallone in that moment makes me think, "Oh, I think he did lose that fight."
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah. It's just sensible enough to keep it open, and that's the last note of ambiguity I noted in the movie.
Oh yeah, everything else is pretty straightforward.
I mean, so,
and let's face it, we're at Seco.
Well, okay, I want to talk. So, first of all, Rocky Jr. appears several years older, wielding a camcorder with a, quote, loud personality. So the movie's very self-conscious about throwing commodities in your face.
Mm-hmm.
And also that this is a more family-oriented movie by pushing the kid up front so prominently.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to me that there's two very conscious moves here, and then the next few scenes through Seco, through the Snake Watch gift that he gives to Adrian, that's borne out that we get sequences which are just filled with product placement and annoying children, right? And things that appear in kids' movies like robot maids. Not even kids' movies. That's the Jetsons.
Right.
Well, so let's talk about Seco. I mean, we've done a whole fucking episode on Seco, but
right.
we've got to readdress
Tune
it here.
Tune into last year's Christmas episode, everyone. But when we found out that Stallone was recutting this movie, the first thing we knew was that Seco the robot was taking a dirt nap. So.
And apparently that meant the whole first half hour of the movie had to go as well.
Yeah.
But okay, that was his choice,
right.
really.
We both. Well, we'll save it.
Yeah, we'll talk about it. We'll
Yeah.
talk about it later. So, for a lot of people, just to sort of put it in context, for a lot of people, this is the nuke the fridge moment of the movie. This is the point at which they can no longer take Rocky seriously. Obviously, a robot in a movie carbon dates us in the mid '80s in a very serious way. But you know what? And I think maybe I said this a year ago as well. I think this is again about setting expectations.
Mm-hmm.
This is telling us this is a science fiction movie. I'm convinced of that, Mike.
Oh, wow.
And the next few scenes are gonna double down on that.
Listen, he's a secret smart guy, but you might
I'm
be
not
giving
saying
him
this
a
is,
little
I'm not
too
saying
much
this is
credit.
smart. I'm saying, well, I'm not saying it's smart in terms of intelligence. I'm saying it's smart in terms of saying this is the movie you're about to see.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes it difficult to criticize.
I don't know. I feel like because
It's awful.
It's ridiculous. But as I understand it, he just saw something like it somewhere and wanted to put it in the movie.
Well, he in that interview that we saw prior to the director's cut screening, he said, this is the actual quote here. A robot talked to me in a pizza parlor, so I had to put it in the movie.
That's what it was. A pizza parlor. That's amazing. But I gotta tell you,
I don't know what my favorite part of that sentence is. I don't think I can decide. I don't think I want to decide.
We shouldn't have to.
Oh, I know.
But
I want to teach that sentence in school.
Like all right, kids, now pay attention.
Yeah.
Oh, shit.
So much going on
That's
in that
amazing.
sentence.
I gotta tell you though, it's just patently absurd. But
Yeah, of course.
but there's something about that song. The boom 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 boom. And that fucking and the editing of it, that fucking bot rolling in, and then "Happy Birthday, Polly." I mean,
The giant Sony letters.
oh my god, it's just there.
This is the infomercial part of the movie.
This is the super secret smart guy to me of Stallone, where he could put in something so stupid and ridiculous, and yet for some reason it still works.
Yeah, and I think
Which is what I could say about this entire movie.
Yeah,
by the way,
for all the reasons, for all the reasons we've said, plus the fact I think we know there's going to be a big shift in genre again,
mm-hmm.
and it's going to lead towards the fantastical side of things.
Lean.
So you put a
lean.
Lean. Okay, it's going to lurch.
It's going to die.
It's going to lurch into. Okay, I'll say it. It's going to lurch into pure fantasy. All right, I said it. So you stick a robot that cannot possibly exist in this historical context in so early on in the movie after the exploding boxing gloves.
Right.
You know where you're at.
Yeah.
You're in no two minds about where this movie's going.
You're in La La Land. All right, let's
I like to think I know something about beer. But nowadays, even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need. The Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook. They're on Instagram. They'll try new beers. They'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer. Do you want me to start again? Okay.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back once again. Tom and I are here discussing the 1985 fucking gem, Rocky IV, directed twice by Sylvester Stallone.
Is that the most redundant date in film history? You know what I mean? Do you ever need to say 1985 film Rocky IV?
For Rocky IV. Painfully
Rocky IV. You could say Rocky IV
obvious.
as a, you could say Rocky IV as a substitute for 1985.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the year of Rocky IV. Oh yeah.
Well, and it's funny. So I mean, we were discussing before how far we got into this movie, because like that whole first segment that we talked about is gone out of the recut, and we start the story in earnest.
We start with Apollo in
and
the
we
pool
start with
his
Apollo in
dogs.
the pool. So the crux of where this story is going is Apollo Creed has seen a giant Russian enter America, and he shall not let this stand.
Yeah, and this is my second good choice up top in this movie. Like choose because you could have conceivably, I know in this series, this series is pathological about like beginning the current movie with the end of the last movie. So you knew it was going to be the Creed Rocky behind closed doors fight because of convention. But I can also see a world in which he's like, oh well, let's just end with the Mr. T fight and go into the next one. But it seems to me, because this is Creed dies in this movie, spoiler alert. And so it's a fitting introduction to a movie in which that happens, and we pick up with Creed far earlier than we do in previous movies, I think. As a central character.
Right. And they really are,
because he's only got another half hour in the movie.
He's only got another 20 minutes or so.
But it's this is very much sort of again, we're sort of changing the character focus. And yeah, I guess that's an inversion as well, that this is about Creed versus another opponent.
Yeah, it's a bit of an inversion, I suppose. And you also have other inversions. What we haven't talked about is, I mean, this movie is, like I said, it's montage heavy, but it's lean on time. This is only a 90-minute movie.
Which is fascinating.
And that's the first time for the Rocky series. And so we don't see any training for Apollo. We don't see...
Right.
So we don't have a training montage for a fight we're going to see. And that's a bit of an inversion, too.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because we found that when sequels get shorter, it's a red flag.
Right.
But actually,
I know.
The opposite is true in this series. Because we go from Rocky 3 and Rocky 4 get progressively shorter, but that works for those movies. And then Rocky 5 is a lot longer,
way too long,
than those two movies, and it doesn't work.
Yeah.
So it's counterintuitive to sequel logic, but it works for the series. So actually, the red flag is that they get longer, I think.
Yeah, you're right.
But yes, no, absolutely. It's which is another disappointment from the director's cut is it's already lean. It's you already edited it.
I mean, you edited this.
There's only so much you can
movie.
edit without it not existing.
Right. But
And
again,
we
we've
sort
talked
of
in the past about the jokes of this series. And Apollo comes over to the house and he's talking to both Rocky and Adrian about what he wants to do.
yeah.
And Adrian is saying she doesn't think it's a good idea, not for either of them. How much more can you take? But there's Paulie pouring a beer into a champagne flute.
Yes.
And then they take the time, like Stallone as a director takes the time to put a reaction shot on Carl Weathers as he's watching this happen. And it's
Well,
really like this sublime small moment where, and these movies are just filled with these moments of like just a pop of a joke.
Oh, completely. Yeah. Still at this point in the series, the comedy is on point.
Yeah.
But Carl Weathers in this scene is all reaction shots because
Right.
Paulie's pouring beer into a champagne flute. There's a robot maid spinning around in the background.
And now
Rocky's kid is 4 years older than the last time you saw him. And Carl Weathers is registering all of it in his face.
Yeah. Paulie, the robot's now talking like a seductress. Paulie says she loves me.
Yeah. I mean, I found it a stretch that Paulie was Rocky's trainer. So to go from that to an interspecies relationship with a robot, it's really. I thought Paulie being of any use to Rocky as a trainer was stretching credulity. So imagine how I felt about this. But we're constantly. I mean, we're starting to intercut Rocky and Creed with Drago.
Right, we're getting the pounds per pressure. We're getting,
and this is continuing the sci-fi theme. We're watching him. We're watching him experience, quote, the technology of human performance.
Right.
Which is sort of like 3/4 of the way to saying he's a cyborg. Right?
Which he will play sometime later in Universal Soldier, right?
And he's not far off that here.
Yeah.
And then we've got robots mating with humans. I mean, what's I mean, we're not in our reality anymore.
Exactly.
But it's interesting you mentioned, like Adrian is the naysayer again, and I feel like not that it really matters in the frame of the kind of movie this is, but we get a lot of character flip-flopping in this one.
Mm-hmm.
Like Adrian becomes anti-fight again out of nowhere, having come to terms with the fact that she's fine with them fighting, like in the previous two movies. Suddenly, like, Creed showed an incredible amount of self-knowledge in the last movie about who he was as a fighter, the decisions he'd made,
right,
the mistakes he'd made. Now he seems to have forgotten all of them.
Yeah.
And suddenly Rocky is the guy who understands that.
Yeah, exactly. Right. He's got that great line where he says, look at us there, like, we can't do that anymore. We're like becoming regular people.
And this is definitely a fantasy moment to me, because basically they're talking about themselves as if they're superheroes.
Right.
At this point. It's like they're saying, it's like the Superman 2 dilemma of, can I just be Clark Kent, or do I have to be Superman as well?
Mm-hmm.
That's the crisis that they're going through, which again is like pushing this into comic book territory.
Right, and because, even before Creed's fight, he's saying, I'm in the best shape of my life.
Yeah. I mean, he always, but the only evidence we have for that is him throwing balls at some Labradors.
Right.
In a pool, stationary.
But to your point on the superhero thing, because when Rocky gets into his training montages, I mean, he is a superhero.
Yeah, completely. Yeah, once we get to that point, so much has happened that you don't even notice it anymore.
Yeah.
But by that point, it is like it's like you are looking at a comic strip of the montage has become a Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin.
And like to your point about what Rocky does see everything. I mean, he even in that same scene, he's cognitive enough to say, do you think this fight isn't you against the Russian? And he
Was
says,
it you against you?
yeah, he says, well, who
Which is
the
what
hell else
Creed
is it
said to
against
him in the
Stallion? He
last
goes,
movie.
you think maybe it's you against you? I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, and I think we're just sort of, again, it's like whatever's convenient for the plot at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever helps us get to the next scene. But they're all still performing it
there's
well.
yeah, there's like these
There's an honesty about their acting and how they're relating to each other. Just in the larger scheme of the series, it doesn't make sense.
Because the character has hit on what is actually happening with the other character. The character's right about that.
Completely. Yeah. Just that it only works in this scene
right.
of the movie.
Yeah.
You have to ignore a lot and retrospectively ignore a lot for it to make sense.
And so, I mean, we haven't talked a lot because, like coming up next, we have the press conference. And so we're getting a little more Brigitte Nielsen, and Michael Pataki, speaking of Halloween 4, is back.
Yes.
And he's great.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And I think, actually, so is Brigitte Nielsen. Like, they're both great.
She is really good. Ludmilla is a potentially interesting character who, weirdly, even in Creed 2 doesn't get... I mean, she's basically a cameo in that.
Yeah.
But she never gets fleshed out as much as you want her to because the performance is good and the idea of the character is great.
Right.
And as a variation on both Adrian and... Well, at this point, she's only called Mrs. Creed, which I find rather insulting,
right.
given how important she becomes in later movies. She's a variation on that, and it would be interesting to, like to see some of the positives of the wife getting involved in the husband's career.
Yeah, but Stallone takes the time
but we
to
can't because
say that
she's Russian.
Yeah,
so
she's an Olympic athlete, so
right.
She knows that world. There's that great moment with Pataki when they're doing the pounds per pressure scene, I believe, and they're saying, we've heard reports of steroids and drug use, and she kind of looks over at him. He slight shake of the head, and she's like, "No, Ivan is naturally trained."
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Again, just like Stallone can hit on great little moments and there's enough great little moments even within this movie for me, like everything he wanted to try to put back in the recut is kind of already there.
Yeah, I agree. Definitely agree with that statement overall.
Yeah. And we'll get to it when we get to it.
I don't think I think the problem with Ludmilla is there just doesn't exist the footage, even after Creed 2, of any shades of grey to the character.
Yeah.
And it would have been interesting to go in that direction. In 2017, it would have obviously been a good thing to do.
Right.
But she is,
But even in this movie...
she's a femme fatale. She's very clearly coded as a femme fatale.
Uh-huh.
Like, traditional film noir femme fatale. At one point, she drags on her Russian government sponsors cigarette,
right?
Which she's a puppet and or whore of the Soviet Union.
But I do think that there's something within, and it's completely unspoken, and maybe I'm just reading into it, but there's something within the performance itself that I read that she has put all her eggs in her husband's basket.
Yeah, correct. Absolutely. Yeah. No, I'm, and none of this is on the shoulders of Bridget. It's all about.
No, yeah.
And once we get to the exhibition fight, there's a scene that was taken out of the director's
Yeah, I know.
cut,
I was surprised.
Where she sort of we sense she's being disingenuous, but she is making the gesture of going over to quote Mrs. Creed and saying, good luck. Have a good fight,
And she says,
"Good luck, have a good fight."
Of course, they're athletes, not soldiers.
Yeah, and it's so it's a shame that was taken out because I do think that's a nice moment that speaks to what you're talking about. And when we get into we get into some ugly male
shit though when Creed is trying to convince Rocky to let him do this one last fight where he's saying we have a killer instinct and we can't turn it off, and we got to be in action and need challenges, and he says we need a war to fight.
But I think it's melancholy. I don't think the movie's behind it because of what happens to Creed.
Yeah, I think you're right about that.
I think there's a detachment from that. I think we're definitely saying that's how Rocky and Creed see the world, but I don't think we're saying that's how the world should be seen.
Okay, yeah.
Maybe I'm giving it too much credit, but
no, I think you might be right about that.
Because his life does end in a horrible tragedy that could have been averted if he just stayed in his pool throwing tennis balls at his Labradors.
Right.
Which looks like fucking heaven to me.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, it's weird. We get I've talked in previous episodes about how sequel and versions have become like musical chairs here. Like everyone is like jumping into new roles in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
And sort of out of nowhere, Rocky becomes Creed's Mickey.
Yeah.
And he
that's what
says,
I mean. There's like not a training scene. There's not a lot to. There's no meat on that bone, and that's an interesting bone. Like I wanted to.
Well, yeah, but I mean, again, that goes back. Like we do the musical chairs rotation about 3 more times in this movie, to the point where you almost don't notice that it's happening.
Yeah.
But it's fascinating because there are echoes of Mickey when he says, "Let's postpone a couple of weeks." Like when he sees that Creed's not ready for the fight. That's a total Mickey move.
Yeah.
And maybe, I don't know, maybe I like the fact that that's understated, that he doesn't start by saying, Mickey once said to me, which is how it will go in the next movie.
Exactly.
No, in fact, Burgess Meredith's ghost would appear
and
say it to Rocky, and then he would say it to Creed. But
Get up, you
I like
son
the fact
of a
that
bitch.
it's just underplayed, like, hey, clearly he's channeling Mickey, but no one's talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
So I like that a lot. And then, I mean,
this such like full fantasy now.
Because
we got.
But also, I mean, for so many reasons, this is one of my favorite sequences in the franchise.
Oh yeah.
But I am not laughing at this scene at all.
No, not me.
It is incredible.
I think it's so good.
Listen, so here's what I think. Like, you talk about propaganda. If you showed this scene to immigrants at Ellis Island,
exactly,
as they came into America, you wouldn't be like, you'd have to break down the border. There'd be too many people trying to get
so
through.
many people flooding in.
Well, I mean, put it in context. It's a Goodwill exhibition fight in Las Vegas between Creed and Drago. A Goodwill exhibition fight, which is interesting because it feels like it's going to be another one of those frivolous matches like the Hulk Hogan one. And it starts off that way, but does not end that way. So it's another inversion. But then, of course, we have
James Brown.
Well, this extraordinarily shot. I think this is where the dry ice budget went.
Right.
Of Drago rising from the basement.
Yeah.
And this basement is just austerity and fear. Like, those are the 2 words I think of. You've got Ludmilla and his Russian sponsor standing there looking at him ominously. There's dry ice everywhere. There's nothing in the basement. And he rises like from the darkness
but
into the light.
But you can see the mechanics of everything, and it kind of
and
looks.
He comes out.
You kind of imagine that maybe Drago has spent some time in Siberia.
Yes.
Like he got banished for a month for not taking the drugs or something, and he's just sort of sheepishly looking around like, oh, I don't like where it's like he's suffering from PT.
But it's like, I mean, it's like the wizard. It's like the it's like Dorothy arriving in Oz, isn't it? We go from a world of nothing and no color to the most
color,
spectacular thing you've ever seen. And this is such an interesting scene for, obviously, you know, that East-West culture class is perfectly represented visually by going from this dark, ominous basement to this world of pure showmanship upstairs.
Right.
But what's fascinating to me about it is,
and
you know,
to me, this is like a remarkable choice from Stallone too, because
yeah,
it's not like James Brown is at the top of his height and fame in 1985.
No.
But he has, like, Stallone has the again, secret smart guy. He picks the showman of showmen.
Oh, exactly.
I mean,
and
what a,
you know,
like,
one of the true, I mean, one of the
choice.
true greats of American music.
Right.
I mean, fuck Survivor, fuck, you know, this is like
exactly
Elvis caliber performer, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference here. I mean, it's literally like, okay, we want to show what the best of America is.
Right. Loud and obnoxious.
And that's what they give you. No, but that's the thing. Like, in another movie, this would be grotesque.
Mm-hmm.
But in here, it is entirely celebratory, and I really respect that. It's excessive, but there's no note of critique anywhere.
Well,
because
yeah,
because what's there is, it's like, yes, this is pure entertainment. This is spectacular. This is what is great about America.
And it's what this fight is supposed to be.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, in a storytelling sense, it's brilliant too, because all of Creed's hubris is building and building through the sequence.
And that balloon is
coming
popped
out as Uncle Sam, dancing to James Brown. But yeah, you know, if you ask me what's great about America, it'd be Las Vegas, James Brown, sport, you know, like sports.
Yeah.
Sports heroes. I mean, that's really legit, isn't it?
Sports.
And you get all of it in this sequence.
Yeah.
But it reminds me of, I don't know if you've seen Nashville, but there's an amazing sequence in Robert Altman's Nashville where you get this like 20-car pileup.
Oh, right, yeah.
And the camera pulls back, and almost like the pulling back almost sort of says, like, you know, isn't America great? Look at all this crazy shit that happens. And that's what I feel in this same sequence. I think it's that good.
I feel the same with the Blues Brothers.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I just think, and you're absolutely right about like how good a choice James Brown is, but it's not the obvious choice.
Yeah.
I also think introducing him this way is a very smart choice.
Oh yeah.
Because there's definitely a world in which this movie would blow that reveal. He'd have his name in the titles, or there'd be a piece of dialogue going, "Hey, we're going to go to Vegas and get James Brown."
Yeah.
But Stallone knows just having him appear, literally like in a puff of smoke,
right,
is the showman move. It's the right move.
And he's got
one's expecting it. I never expect it.
No.
I always forget James Brown.
And he's got that great camera angle because, like, you don't even see him right away when the song starts. The song starts, and then let's like down from below, and all of a sudden he turns around, and it's like dun 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 dun. Hey,
were you as afraid as I was that he was gonna end up on the cutting room floor?
I was really,
yeah, I was afraid. But I mean, you couldn't possibly do that.
Oh,
but he's tied. I mean, that's it. You're absolutely right as well. Like, he's not tied to the '80s in the way that Survivor are, or other aspects of this movie. He is just like.
Well, there's also
like
again, there's like
greatness.
Little touches. First of all, I love them, like Paulie, Duke, and Rocky all walking in, and you see the surprise on their faces.
Yes, that is great.
And then you see women, like the dancers, shaking ass in front of them. And and all of them look like Duke and Rocky both go, well, that's ass shaking in front of our faces. Okay. And Paulie grabs that fucking stick with the skull on it, which is amazing. Like it's going to be the gift he gives Seiko when he gets home. And then the last little touch is when the song finishes and James Brown goes and taps Apollo Creed's glove like they know each other.
Like they, which of course, I mean, if you're gonna play the Muhammad Ali card, of course, James Brown performed at the Rumble in the Jungle concert.
Exactly.
So they're playing off that. Oh yeah, I hadn't even thought about that. That historically it makes sense too. And dramatically, it's kind of funny because it's not inorganic to the series because of exactly what you're saying about the way that Rocky and Paulie are reacting to it.
Mm-hmm.
Because they come from this totally different world. Like, boxing for them is not about showmanship.
Right.
It's not about performance or entertainment. It's about slugging
survival.
someone. It's about slugging someone.
Yeah.
Repeatedly. And, their reaction to it is part of the drama too. And it builds to one of my favorite lines again in the series, and one of the saddest lines in the series. Creed says, "God, I feel born again."
Yeah.
And you kind of, I don't know. Again, I could just ask you, but
that line has always stuck out to me.
You would think something's wrong. You didn't know what was going to happen. You're like, oh, something's off here.
Yeah.
They've gone with a little bit of the
in
John
that
G.
single
Avildsen
moment,
Christ allegory, without going full pelt.
Yeah, in that single moment for me, I can even remember back when I first saw it when I was a kid and thinking, like, dark clouds are gathering and doom is a-coming.
Right.
And
it's like the Last Supper.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what we've just seen is basically the Last Supper, isn't it? If you're going to go with the Christ allegory, which they're clearly pushing here. See, John G. Avildsen didn't like the direction this series went in, but this is a good bit of Christ allegory that he would be proud of.
Right?
I think. If he could get, if he could get past his own pathological problems with the series.
Right. Well, and let me just, before we go to break, I want to talk, because we're into like this first major song, and we've talked about how this, the music montages. I just got to talk about the music for a moment in this entire movie. I mean, I had this soundtrack when I was a kid, and I played it.
It's a jukebox musical.
Oh my God.
The number of like huge artists and names attached to the soundtrack, whereas prior all we'd had was like basically Frank Stallone pastiches of traditional American music. Now we've got like, it's basically in the Rocky 3 is Frank Stallone doing a version of James Brown. Now we've got James Brown.
Right.
That's the difference.
And you've got Survivor coming back with Burning Heart, Hearts on Fire, that song.
Yeah.
For the training montage, and No Easy Way Out, which is what we're coming up on. But like, my note is montage car ride perfection.
Well,
and it's all connected to the music of this movie. Like
it's
like
more
said,
of a musical than any of the other
musical.
movies.
And I mean, Secret Smart Guy, like, he hits it out of the park with every single choice, every single time to me. And it's one of the things
it's also about
endures for me for this movie. It's one of the things that lasts and that I remember are all the musical choices.
Right. I agree. And it's I think once you go as far into fantasy as this movie goes, there's a sense of, yeah, why not? Let's make it a musical. Like, you know what I mean? It's like we've become so utopian at this point.
Yeah.
We might as well be a musical as well. I mean, do we want to talk about Creed first before we talk about the music video for No Easy Way Out, or how do you want to do this?
You mean the fight?
Do you want to do fight or song first?
No, well, let's do. If you like podcasts like I do, boy, do I have a treat for you. You need to
stay on target
and check out the Sounds and Cinema podcast. Listen as your host, sound designer and music creator Tony Parham, and co-host, musical performer and sound lover Derek Hansen, D-Rock if you're nasty, and I am, discuss all things sound related to film, television, stage, and theatrical productions. They discuss environmental sounds, bioacoustics, dialogue, the nature of communication through sound, but as an added bonus, they drink beer and try to
stay on target.
Find them wherever you get your podcasts and listen to the pure mania of a man who can charitably be described as Doug, the dog from Up, and another man with a soothing and sultry voice trying to get that man to
stay on target.
That's the Sounds in Cinema podcast. Tune in and listen to the sounds they are creating just for you. And we're back once again, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here discussing Sylvester Stallone's first attempt at Rocky IV. All right, so let's talk.
Sometimes the first choice is the right choice.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to it.
We'll get to it, and I don't want to immediately downplay.
And I don't want to poo-poo that recut because
and I love to poo-poo recuts.
Yeah, right.
That'll be on my gravestone. He poo-pooed recuts. But
died bravely poo-pooing recuts.
Or he recut poo-poos. But I have a lot to say about it, and not all of it negative.
Yeah, me too. But now he's in the ring with the heavy bag with eyeballs.
Is it just me?
Which, by the way, is another great line in that press conference. You get that heavy bag with eyeballs in the ring right now. Fucking love it.
Is it just me, or is there an inordinate amount of grease on these two men's bodies?
Oh, no, yeah, you're right about that.
I mean, it's funny because, just spoiler alert, when we saw the Rocky IV recut, I noticed that Rocky and Mr. T were pretty greasy in their fights when they did the recap. But here is where I have the note that these are just
there was a budget for grease. There was.
I mean, it's like it's muscle porn. We've already had muscle porn. This is muscle porn. Plus.
There was a budget line for grease for this movie.
Grease and dry ice is like about 35% of the budget.
That's why they had to up it to $30 million.
And did you also think that this fight felt more brutal and graphic than we'd seen before? That hit me this time, that
it was more...
Maybe it's because we're having so much fun prior to it that it gets very ugly and violent very quickly.
Well, I think it's because this is one of the few fights where the toll of what's happening in the ring is actually happening. That's the one thing about all Rocky fights is, like, let me tell you what fighters really do. They put their gloves in front of their face so you can't hit their fucking face, which is never present in a Rocky fight.
I didn't realize you were a boxing commentator.
So, if these were real fights, usually the first punch is the punch that would put somebody on the canvas because that's how good a punch it is.
Right.
And that's the true in this particular fight as well, but he lasts, even longer than he should have, considering what's actually happening in the ring. And so it's weird that, like, they're still doing that Rocky thing where they're remarkably shaving off violence, but it is more realistic. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's like
graphic.
It's more graphic, right? Exactly.
Yeah.
So the hits that he's actually taking are punishing.
Yes.
And that's something that's kind of absent in all the other fights, because all the punches are just as graphic and as violent, but the fighters can push through it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and the other thing that strikes me here, I think you started to mention it, is we're fudging time again, because it doesn't feel like this fight is taking place in real time. I mean, what does reality mean anymore? Mm-hmm. I guess by this stage of the movie. But I always felt that there was more of an effort to keep other previous fights in real time, but this is more about going for that throwing the towel moment where everything happens at once.
Right.
And you're like, well, if you think about it, you're like, well, that couldn't all happen simultaneously.
Yeah.
Right? We're seeing the action.
And now we're starting,
like,
angles. I don't know if I should even talk about it yet, but that was the one major big improvement in the recut, was how he recut that fight and the towel part of it specifically.
Well, they go for pure melodrama here of it's like stop the fight.
Yeah, but not
kind
just
of thing.
that, but he like there is no way that even Rocky Balboa, no matter
Yeah.
what Creed is doing in the ring, and they
Uh-huh.
pay lip service in the original cut by having a close up on Creed's face where he says no,
Yeah.
as if that's what the character would do in that moment, was look over to his corner, see if he's getting a towel, and say, no, don't do that. I can get myself out of this situation in which I'm about to die. And that's the thing that Rocky Balboa, that's what Stallone used as a crutch to not throw in the towel. Whereas in any fight, you're immediately throwing in the towel in that scene. Like, I'll give him the first round and like Creed coming back.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about don't, because that's actually poignant to me. I like that Apollo, even though he's beaten, even though he knows he should quit right now, he looks at Rocky and says, don't you stop this fight for anything.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the regular cut, they have this great moment where he looks over at his wife and she is on the verge of tears, and he can barely get his hand up, and he puts his glove up like, I got this. So I love all of that in the first round. But after the second round starts, the first thing that anybody in the corner would do is throw in the towel. The first thing.
But is it just that that it's broad strokes now, and we're in like Herculean, these are like Greek gods fighting, and normal human rules don't apply. That's the sense.
Well, and that's the other thing. Like the way it's cut in the original cut, Drago would go to jail. He would go to jail for like second-degree murder.
Jail.
Because a referee tries
Not
to
one
stop
of your
the
cushy
fight.
commie jails.
Yeah, a referee tries to stop the fight, and he pushes him out of the way and hits him more. And so they cut all of that out in the recut, which is really smart.
And it's a little bit of a hangover from the sort of wrestling movie stuff from Rocky 3 as well. Like we have some callbacks to that as well. They've not forgotten that now everything works on wrestling logic.
Right.
I mean, yeah, and once again we're in a movie of two halves, and
right.
And the look between Draco and Rocky sets up the second half of the movie, right?
Yeah.
It's like, this is what the rest of the movie is going to be about.
And he dies.
And Creed dies. And another major legacy character dying before the actor dies.
Right.
So we're 2 for 2 now.
Exactly.
And spoiler alert, we're going to be 4 for 4. And I suppose we can talk more about this funeral when we talk about the cut, because that's when it becomes significant. But the funeral scene is strange.
Yeah.
In the original
especially
cut.
When you see what he put back in.
what he had to play with. Yeah, it's odd.
That's the thing about the recut for me, is that there are so many scenes that he puts back in, but to me, like, again, your movie's 90 minutes. I'll take an hour 45. Keep this movie exactly as it is, but put the scenes in that work so well.
Yeah.
And I'll include the scene where Adrian leaves to go to the kitchen, and Rocky follows her into the kitchen after Apollo has explained that he wants to try and fight this Russian. That's another really good scene, I think.
There's a lot. I wonder if, and this will become relevant in the next few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if he's reacting to the time and thinking about, what MTV has done to attention spans and, the rise of the music video, and thinking people want lean and mean.
Right.
They want fast cutting. They want, that kind of... I wonder if he's just... I mean, if a robot in a pizza parlor can convince him to put a robot in the movie, then surely the popularity of MTV music videos will make him think that shorter is better than longer when it comes to movies.
Yeah.
But it's like a, even
because
without
I have a
knowing
note
any
here.
of that...
I even have a note that says this funeral is an imitation of feelings.
Yes, and that's pretty much the note and this was before seeing the director's
Right.
cut.
Because the
I
director's cut is the complete opposite.
Right. It's just raw emotion.
Yeah.
And even without knowing what the alternative was, I could sense that this is all happening a little too quickly. Like we've got lots of, lots of big emotional decisions. The funeral, the rematch,
Right.
it's all happening a little too fast to
He
feel
has the
authentic.
press conference for the rematch without his wife there.
Right.
And he comes back home.
And there's no time
to have a
it
fight
feels
with
like
her.
there's no time between Apollo dying and him
Yeah.
going. It feels like he walks out of that match and goes straight into the press
Yeah.
conference. Because there's a photo magazine montage. That's the only thing dividing the two.
Right.
So yeah, we'll talk about like how the alternative to that is better later. I like Paulie. I'm not going to give much credit to the next movie, but there's one or two to Rocky V. But there's a few moments in this that I do think like pave the road to the next movie that they've actually thought about and picked up on. When Paulie reacts to Rocky's announcement of the fight by saying "No money,"
Yeah. Right.
I'm like, "Uh-oh, red flag here."
See, but I've
this
always
guy might mismanage your finances at some point in the future.
I've always taken that as Paulie would never do anything for no money.
Right.
But I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying.
Or
about...
maybe you need that money.
Yeah, I get what
you
you're
need
saying.
that money more than you think you do.
Because I went ahead and fucked up, but
right. Yeah. So it's, and then prior to, I mean, we're getting close to No Easy Way Out. And we will talk about
it's
that.
amazing.
But before that, I want to say another one of my favorite scenes, and maybe I like this movie more than I think.
I'm telling you, it's good.
It's very
fucking good movie.
One of my favorite scenes in this movie and of the franchise. It's the scene between. Maybe this is the equivalent of your beach scene for me. I think it is.
But I think of both scenes. I think of this scene and the beach scene, because
Rocky on the staircase, arguing with Adrian, and the reason what I like about it is that he has gone full classic Hollywood here.
Mm-hmm.
So, first of all, it's a callback to. Or an homage to Kirk Douglas and Lana Turner in Bad and the Beautiful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Like, explicitly. They're using chiaroscuro lighting from American film noir.
Right.
Very evidently. He quotes Gary Cooper. He's gone full old Hollywood.
Oh, what's the
here.
quote?
Well, you say your man's got to do what a man's got to do.
Yeah,
which is
yeah,
Gary
yeah,
Cooper.
yeah.
And I just love it. I think that gives it a legitimacy and a literacy that makes it more interesting than just having that.
Well,
scene
and it's also
in
the
a movie.
first time.
It's a scene from a Lifetime movie if you don't have that extra visual layer.
Well,
to
it's
it,
the first time. One of the things I love about it, character-wise, is that Adrian will always tell Rocky the truth. But
even if that truth changes,
right,
scene to scene. But yes,
but yes. in this moment, she tells him he can't win, and that's the first time I think she's ever thought he can't win. And even the character Rocky himself, like you see it take the air out of him a little bit, and he says Adrian always tells the truth. But then, of course, he's got to America it up with a little like. And strangely, they cut this out of the recut and then put it in voiceover later in the movie. But he says,
is that strange given what Stallone's later directorial career?
Okay, yeah, fair point.
It's strange for now. Yeah. If he was making this in 1985, it'd be strange.
Right.
Yeah.
But right. He's got that little part where he says, to beat me, he's going to have to kill me. And to do that, he's got to be willing to die himself, and I'm not sure he's willing to do that. And that kind of strikes to what we call heart in an athlete. That resonates for me. I love that scene.
I've heard of athletes.
I really like.
I've heard of athletes. You don't have to talk about them. fucking condescending me, I'll fucking kill you. Brad Pitt and True Romance. Fucking condescending me. No, I know. Like, it's a specific concept. I'm just kidding.
Oh, that's good.
But to to drag it back to my frame of reference, Talia Shire here says, "Read the papers."
Yeah, right.
Which is one of her most famous lines from Godfather.
Yeah.
Read the papers. Read the papers. I was like, how many movies does Talia Shire say "read the papers" in? Is that just a thing she adds in? It's not even in the script.
Like she just says, "Hey, Sylvester, I've got an idea."
And he's like, "Yeah, from the Godfather. We're doing a bunch of other Hollywood shit.
You're putting in
here."
a bunch of montage of magazines and papers and stuff, right? So what if I say, haven't you read the papers?
Yeah, this scene is like all Hollywood, so yeah, it'll fit right in, yeah.
Fuck.
That is dangerously close to how that conversation probably really
exactly.
went. But this is the part we've all wanted to talk about since this podcast started, which is an actual music video. Yeah. I'm gonna say it's not a music montage. I'm gonna call it a music video.
Yeah, and one of the best ever.
And if you superimpose the song credit on the final shot of this,
right,
you could literally detach this from
the movie
and put it on MTV.
And I swear to God, I think that it at the time that's what they did.
They must have done.
Yeah.
There's literally just enough time for a song credit to come up at the end while he drives away. Like,
I remember that. I remember it. That is how that music video went.
And to say that this is a button on the first half of the movie is not giving it enough credit.
Yeah.
Because literally you can watch the seconds tick down to the middle of this movie as this scene ends.
Right, exactly.
You go on HBO Max, watch this on, like, scan to literally exactly halfway through the movie, you will see a car disappearing through a tunnel. But, I mean...
But everything about it, Tom, the editing, This
is the future, though. This is what Stallone will become wholesale from now on, right?
Right.
I mean, because I'm trying to think of what we've had so far in the way of recap montages. I mean, we've had obviously, the beginnings of all of the movies. And here and there, we've had a little bit. We have Mickey and Rocky watching the fight on film, and a few flashes here and there, but nothing of this magnitude yet. I mean, this is all 4 movies, including, and this is where we get into critical errors.
Because we know
this movie,
we like it, you can almost see the birth of it, right? Because we know Stallone's penchant for showing pictures of all movies, but at the end credits in these movies and the Rambo movies.
Yeah,
and this is the first time where he's like, "I've got an idea."
But the parallel goes even further with Rambo than that, because in Rambo he starts doing lengthy montages in the 4th movie, and then again at the end of the 5th, and the pattern is exactly the same here. Right. So it's the parallel goes so far, and I guess the thing about it is why this is one of the more attractive versions of the recap montage that we will see endlessly from now on in the series. Right. To me, is because it is wrapped up in that idea of a mid-80s music video where it almost feels appropriate because of the genre it's in. You can get away with this level of recap. Right. It reminds me of that, that people who say that the dream sequences in The Big Lebowski are too excessive. I'm like, what? Have you been to LA?
Yeah.
This is what LA is like. You go there, it's this kind of dreamscape.
And this is where I thought the Dry Ice budget went for all the Dolph Lundgren approaching him stealthily in the ring portions of this song. But again,
so the first half of the movie's over.
Yeah, first half of the movie's over, and I'll talk a little bit about the recut because again, I don't think putting Dolph Lundgren in black and white is giving me too much more than this original cut gives me. I prefer the original cut.
Well, the 80s part of this is already at 11.
Yeah, exactly. So
you can't get it down to less than 10 by cutting out Dolph Lundgren with dry eyes.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's like you at that point you're really just shaving the dry ice. Sounds delicious.
Sounds so good. Put some syrup on that.
Paulie's fucking a robot.
At the very least.
And maybe getting her pregnant.
Right. Unbelievable. Yeah, but
why do we like this movie so much, Mike? It's fucking a robot.
I mean, we keep saying this movie goes to 11. It's like Nigel wrote the movie for Stallone.
Yeah,
Nigel Tufnell
this is
from
Rocky IV,
Spinal
Lick My
Tap,
Love Pump.
You know?
Rocky IV, Lick My Love Pump.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Paulie says I'm going to have her wires tied when I get back. Which, again, I don't want to touch that.
He'd be fucking that robot.
He's right.
God damn it.
I thought it was interesting as well, like, after so this movie is very kid forward.
Mm-hmm.
Like at the beginning, you're like, "Oh, this is gonna be like a kids movie," and then we get into like the Creed stuff.
But then
like,
you see
the
the gnarly death of a beloved character.
and then it's like, "Oh yeah, that's right. He has a kid who like speaks now and is a part of the movie," and
but once again, leaving the child behind. As always.
Leaving the child behind, but Rocky and Rocky Jr., they have this basically, a type of scene and establishing a relationship between them that is basically the core of the next two movies for them.
Yeah.
They will have this scene again and again. Not in a bad way, actually a very good way. In like a realistic, this is how father and sons, this is like this is the push and pull between father and son for the next two movies in a good way. So I like that they added in that moment.
Yeah.
Because it it actually gives life to Rocky Jr. beyond these movies.
But we also have another inversion until it's reversed again.
A counter inversion.
Yeah, we have an inversion followed by a counter inversion, because this is the first time that Rocky will start training for a fight in earnest. I mean, I know we have Rocky 2, but he's not really got his back into it. But this is the first time he's willing to start training for a fight where Adrian's not in his corner.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. And probably shouldn't have been there.
Right. Yeah.
I don't think it's that easy to get into Russia at this time.
Yeah, exactly. But you have to imagine that even within the guise of this narrative, this story, that like he would be able to bring whoever he wanted for his training. So
well, apparently everyone, the world's press, everyone can get into Russia.
And by to Russia, I mean Wyoming. Which is
Wyoming by way of Dr. Zhivago. So anyway,
I really think...
I started laughing. No, listen, I started laughing then because I thought we should probably tell people Rocky goes to Russia. Yeah. because it seems natural for me, but it's not. Right? It's not a thing that happens in anything.
Well, when it happens, you have to like escape again, like Gregory Hines in White Knights.
Nice.
You enter Russia, you're staying in Russia.
Right. So he flies into Russia, and the lyrics of the songs that we hear are now specifically about the movie.
Yeah.
So it's like a voiceover song, right?
It's so fucking good, though.
And that's the Survivor song, right?
Yeah.
And there's no like Eye of the Tiger is like, yeah, that's thematically what this movie's about. Now it's
Yeah, exactly.
like literally like a voiceover
Right.
written out in song, right? Am I wrong about
No,
that? Or...
I don't think so.
Okay. But it's a good version of that, and the next movie has a terrible version of that, so we should be
So we
grateful.
should be grateful, exactly. And
So,
again, I mean, we're in the second half of this movie. We started the second half. Oh, well, I guess you're right. We ended the first half with a montage.
I'd say that's more of a button.
But it's like, yeah,
I think
it's bridging
it's
the
loop
gap between. So it's a part. It lies both in the first half and the second half of the movie.
And it's a literal tunnel.
Yes, exactly.
Secret smart guy,
fucker. And then back to back, we have two working out montages.
God, I can't take this movie anymore.
It's so amazing. However, dispersed within that, you have Tony Burton being Tony Burton, the best fucking actor in the world. He's so good in all of these movies. I could barely stand it. When he's sitting there in front of that mirror and he's saying, "You know what you have to do, so do it. Do it." And that was really bothered me in the recut, because he says "do it" twice, and he cut the second "do it" out of the.
There's so many spiteful cuts like that make no sense.
Really made me mad.
Anyway, we'll talk a little bit about that later. But this is fascinating for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's more musical chairs, because even though it doesn't seem like it, Willie is now Rocky's trainer. Even though he's basically training himself.
Wait, who? Now...
Isn't his name Willie? What's his name?
You mean Tony Burton?
Tony Burton, yeah.
Duke.
His character name's Willie.
No, he's
though,
Duke.
Right? Oh, who's Willie?
Maybe his first name's Willie. Maybe Duke's I forget. I'd have to...
Okay, Duke. But I get confused because there's another Duke in the next movie. Anyway.
That's true.
So anyway, Duke is now Rocky's trainer.
Right.
So now Duke is Mickey.
Mm-hmm.
After being Creed's Mickey.
Exactly.
But we're not really... That doesn't really matter. It doesn't really play into anything. But what this says to me is, like, this scene also says to me that this is now a revenge drama.
Right.
This is all about... this is later we'll hear that in this version that it's an unsanctioned fight, that this is purely personal.
Mm-hmm.
It's all about getting revenge for Creed, and Duke makes that explicit. Says, go out there, do this to avenge Creed.
Yeah.
Which I find fascinating because, again, we're adding another generic element to this already, overloaded generic canon.
Right.
So I think that's fascinating. Yeah, and it's like the vision of Russia, I think, is fascinating because when he arrives at the airport, it's like a Bond movie.
Mm-hmm.
But when he gets to his cabin, we're in Dr. Zhivago.
Yeah.
So we're somewhere between 1894 and 1965. But not again, 1985 Russia.
Again, secret smart guy, because there's a whole nother level of this movie that I think I spoke to a year ago. Because what he's setting up in this moment is science versus nature.
I have that exact line here. Rocky versus Drago training, another contrast montage, this time between Rocky's nature versus Drago's science. Yeah. Boom. It must be true if we both came up with it independently.
So, Stallone working at a high fucking level.
Yeah, and this is where we get into real propaganda territory. There's the sort of the image of him helping the farmer whose cart is broken. So basically, he's like, I suppose in Stallone's mind, in the anti-communist mind, it's like everyone's so fucking communist over here that they wouldn't even help a farmer. They'd be like, no, you gotta send a letter to the state to get your cart fixed. But he just comes in and he fixes it. And he takes it on his own shoulders.
Gives it a little wave as he starts jogging away.
And it's like fascinating to me that it's like Rocky's in Russia helping, the working class, and it's like Reagan is systematically dismantling the working class in
Right.
America while all this is going on. But it's also interesting, like nature versus science, but also Drago is made strong by technology in the state,
Mm-hmm.
and Rocky is being made strong by the elements of the world around him. I think that's fast. And again, very superhero comic book image we're dealing with here. Like, he's basically Nuclear Man at this point.
Oh, that's great.
And then Adrian arrives.
Yeah, no
which
matter what.
is a nice romantic moment.
Yeah.
And really,
And it breaks
really
up
good.
the two music montages.
She's just a breakwater between music montages.
That's what she's there for. But again, kind of secret smart guy. It's a character moment. And so,
Yeah. Speaking of character moments, we forgot to mention Paulie falling in the ice in his "Don't Tread on Me" jacket.
Yes.
And then going back to the cabin and listening to Alvin and the Chipmunks.
Right. Alvin and the Chipmunks.
I have no more to say about that.
Alvin and the Chipmunks didn't make the cut. But how is it possible? How is it possible when they get off the plane, Tom, that in the original movie they didn't put in what he put in the recut, which is, Paulie, why'd you take Adrian's earmuffs? And he says, they look better on me.
Right.
That's just too good.
I also think, probably because it was considered an outtake, but...
Oh, yeah, we're right about that. It's absolutely a goof.
Yeah, but in the new director's cut, and as you pointed out, there's already been.
And I don't mean the earmuffs part. I mean after falling in the snow when he looks directly down the barrel of the camera.
Yeah, I know, but again, you sort of think, why wouldn't you put that in? It's just as funny,
Right?
And like, what does it matter if he looks into the camera in a movie where he fucks a robot? Think that fourth wall.
Yeah.
Thoroughly dismantled by now.
I had alluded to this earlier, but now we are getting into the area of where everything that has previously happened in a Rocky movie is forgotten.
Yes, I'd agree with that.
He's supposed to be blind. The first time they ask him about brain damage is in Rocky 2. In Rocky 3, they said there's no way with a fighter that big and strong that he could last longer than 8 rounds.
Uh-huh.
And in this movie, he is told by his wife he cannot possibly win. Mm-hmm. And then through the forces of nature and 2 montages, all of that is forgotten. And he goes 15 rounds with the biggest man anybody has ever seen in the history of the world.
There's a moment where he climbs a mountain.
Yes.
I don't want to gloss over that.
But he doesn't get to the top of it.
Right.
He stops just short.
That's his idea of restraint.
It's very upsetting.
He climbs. We haven't seen him do more than run really fast.
Just go 20 more feet. Come on.
So, this image of, again, totally propagandistic image of, I'm an individual, I can do what the fuck I want, I'll climb up a mountain if I want to and not go to the top. But it's like, we're in a more epic territory than we've ever been in before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this movie, this is like
when he's
Fast
climbing
and
up the top of that mountain,
extrapolation.
When he's
right?
when he's climbing.
We started to be about heisting DVD players into going into space.
When he's climbing the top of that mountain, he should be wearing a cape.
Well, and also when he gets to the top, he screams at the top of his voice, "Drago," which to me is a specific reference to Star Trek II: Wrath of Khan.
You think so?
William Shatner shouting, "Can't." At this point in the movie, we're so deep in sci-fi fantasy. What is one more Star Trek reference? Right. But again, it's revenge drama. It's not about boxing. It's not about sport. Mm-hmm. It's definitely not about boxing.
No.
It's about getting revenge.
Yeah.
and one guy, in the same way that Shatner was.
But
like,
it's also it's getting
you killed my
revenge,
son.
but also getting revenge on those evil Russians.
Oh,
and so
yeah, it's all tied.
It's all tied
up.
together,
Well,
and it's all playing on that geopolitical level.
it does, but it's interesting that like it kind of. I remembered this film incorrectly. The like the direct address propaganda stuff is very late on in the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like it just hits you out of nowhere. It's always in the background of everything he's doing.
Yeah.
But at some point it becomes less about revenge and more about winning the Cold War.
Yeah.
But I'm not quite sure when that happens. Somewhere in
it's
one
when
of
the
these
crowd
three
starts
montages.
chanting his name.
Right. But well, yeah, we probably when Gorbachev arrives is the point at which we've definitely shifted. And this fascinates me for so many reasons. The main one being that this is 1985. Gorbachev has just taken power.
Right.
So Stallone is a real early adopter of the hopes for reform that politicians would later see in Gorbachev. And
right.
say, oh, this guy is enough of a reformist that the Cold War.
Here's the thing I keep wondering, Tom. Did Stallone influence bringing down...
Well, Reagan claims that...
the Soviet Union?
Listen, listen. So I have two theories
Did
about
this secret smart guy fucking bring down the Berlin
Secret
Wall?
smart spy. Secret smart guy into secret smart spy. So I have two theories about this. Reagan famously said that Steve Gutenberg made him, attempt nuclear disarmament, right? Because he saw that Steve Gutenberg TV movie about nuclear war on TV, and that changed his mind about nuclear weapons. So why the fuck would Stallone in this movie not make him think, hey, maybe I should talk to this Gorbachev guy?
Right.
My other theory is that it's the other way around. That the same government apparatus that helped him make Rambo 3, even though they're not credited here.
Yeah, right.
Probably because it was too sensitive, probably that they wouldn't want the people to know that America was intervening in this movie in the same way they would with Rambo 3. That people are saying to him, because how the fuck did he know in 1985 that Gorbachev was the guy to pin your hopes on?
Secret smart guy.
Well, yeah, not that much of a secret smart guy. I mean, actual politicians didn't know that in 1985. So maybe Reagan was, whispering in his ear saying, hey, say something nice about Gorbachev in this movie.
Maybe.
That'll go a long way to helping. I don't know.
It's too much to even speculate.
It's a rabbit hole.
It's too, yeah.
But it's a big deal. It is big deal in the film. And another huge deal from a character point of view. Paulie comes good finally.
Yes. This episode is brought to you by Tuati Fitness. Does the coronavirus have you feeling oogie? Have you been sitting on your couch for weeks? Nay, have you been sitting on there for months? Well, it's time for you to get back in shape. Check out Tuati Fitness. You can find them on Instagram. You can find them on Facebook. Tuati Fitness was started by Tina Bernard. She is ready and raring to go to help you get back into the shape you want to get into. They've got all kinds of classes. They've got outdoor in-person classes. They've got online classes if that's what you prefer. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to get back in shape. You're going to find a variety of exercises. You're going to have strength training, cardio, weightlifting, even fun 5-minute burnouts that will push you to your limits. So get off the couch, get into shape. Go ahead and check out Tuati Fitness. Tina Bernard has got you for all your needs. I know her personally. She's fantastic. You're not going to meet a better person to help you become the new you. Check it out. And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here once again, finishing up with the masterpiece of Rocky IV. This is a long episode, Tom.
The in-context masterpiece, Rocky IV.
This is a long episode we're going to have, and all I can say is, because Rocky IV is that fucking good. Clearly.
There's literally too much to talk about. I don't feel like skimping on any of it.
Exactly. I can't. I refuse. Well, when we last left, we were talking about, Paulie coming good.
In multiple ways, actually.
This scene,
I mean,
every time I watch it, it makes me tear up.
it's
so
well
earnest.
acted. It is. It comes out of nowhere, which is great because it's not it's not filmed in a melodramatic way. They just it like you say, it's earnest. He just starts crying and tells Rocky how much he means to him. And he gets a chance to sort of shine as a character actor and cast off the sort of bigoted clownish dimension for a few moments, and it's a really good choice.
But within it,
and I remember you saying
they have great moments within it where he says, this isn't my way.
Yeah,
they have that. He makes a.
That's why it's good.
Yeah, he makes the great directorial choice to show Talia Shire's face when he's saying it, and that's her brother. And she can see. It's like you could see the goodness she always saw within him coming out. And she's happy and proud in the moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Making it about the three of them was a really good choice. And also, I remember you saying a year ago when we did our Seiko minisode that I was worried that we'd lose too much of Burt Young if we got rid of Seiko completely. But you remembered this scene, and
right.
I think you're right. I think there's enough here, and then what happens in the fight to give us enough Burt Young without Seiko. It's really but I also remember while we were watching the ultimate director's cut, after that scene I sort of turned to you and sort of said, oh, as Paulie, oh, by the way, I lost all your money. I think you'd have known they were going to go down that path. That would have been another great book. Just as he's out of earshot.
Right.
Oh, by the way, I mismanaged your finances.
And I mean, we'll get to it when we get to it, but that's a major fuck up for that movie. Because it didn't have to be that. Anyway, I'll save it. But
yeah, I think I probably overall agree with you, although I appreciate it in essence. In execution, I do not.
Yeah.
As you know. And then I feel like we have a mirror of the Goodwill fight here.
You think?
Like the way, well, sort of like we have a moment where we stand back and look at Russian propaganda.
Right. No, you're right about that.
And they're sort of saying it's different, but the patriotism is there and the scale is there.
The scale's there.
So it's almost a respect. Almost.
Yeah.
Fear, yes. But also respect. It's like, hey, these guys are just patriotic saps like we
exactly.
are.
Because
right?
you get the smoke, the sort of almost Olympic torch-like smoke things as he's walking in.
It's not unattractive. Like
no.
It's
affecting.
Yes.
If I was a Russian, it would make me proud.
That's, I think, the point, right?
Totally.
That's what I got from the scene.
Absolutely.
And also, being able to relate on the level of you love your country, we love our country. Yeah. We can find.
And again, like, is that secret smart guy
through this
working?
guy Gorbachev who's in the balcony? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So and you've seen Masters of the Universe more recently than I have, but
yes.
Is am I right in thinking that Dolph Lundgren appears to be like more superhuman and a fantastical creature in the way he's introduced here than he is at any point in Masters of the Universe?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like he's lit like He-Man.
Yeah.
But He-Man, as it should be
the
done,
way
not as
he's
it's done
lit,
in Masters of the Universe.
They have, and again, like honestly, good acting from him, because there are moments where the camera is so close up on his face, and when he looks back at Rocky during the anthem, like, you're fucked.
I think it's really interesting because, as Stallone talked in that interview about how he put footage in that showed more of the character's emotion. But I get the sense that he's scared all the time. and that he's looking over his shoulder every single second. Without him like, you know, they put in a scene of him not being able to answer a question, and he looks around like he's gonna get sent to Siberia.
Right.
You don't actually need, like, I got all that information from just his acting.
Right.
Anyway, that's just me. So it's, yeah, and the same example really of, like, you've done enough to tell me that this is what's going on, is we hear the box. By the way, the entire world's press is there.
Yeah.
I don't know how they all got visas,
Right.
but okay. Apparently anyone can just wander into Russia.
The
in
USA
1985,
Network was present.
which I know is not true. But one of the commentators says, you know, this fight's not sanctioned.
Right.
And I have the note here. I'm just like, oh, you know, they put that in to show that it's personal. It's a revenge drama, and that this is not a sporting event. And they do, you know, there's a lot of shoe leather burned in the recut on that.
Oh, yeah.
It's like, oh, I already knew that from this one line.
Yeah.
Sometimes economy is better.
Well, and that,
You know?
so it's funny because not only that, but in the newspaper montage,
Yeah.
it's stated there too that
Yes.
they're not sanctioning the fight, USA Boxing. So,
You're right. So it's interesting.
but again,
Choices.
like that's, and I don't dislike that scene.
No,
in the
hey,
recut.
the acting in that scene's fantastic. I'm so glad those actors got to get back in the movie.
Right.
It's the Survivor guy from Curb Your Enthusiasm who's a great character actor.
But
And I like the way this match is filmed, because
I was going
to
to
me,
just say the same thing.
so-
I was going to ask you, where do you think it stands within the other fights?
Well, I don't even like to compare it to the other fights, because this for me is like
It's
style.
completely its
Style
own thing.
Style has conquered over substance.
Yes.
In this movie, and now this fight will reflect that. That's the way I read it.
But still within
It's disoriented. It's fast cutting. There's lots of interfades. We're more obsessed with how it looks than what's happening.
in the fight. But
Because that's what this movie has been about.
right. But I'll say that for everything after the second round. Because in the
Yeah.
first round, he takes a beating. And you have this great moment where he sits in the chair and Duke says, "What's going on out there?" And he says, "I'm losing." He says, "I see 3 of them out there." And Paulie says, "Hit the one in the middle." Duke says, "Right, hit the one in the middle," which is from a real fight.
Fantastic.
You remember?
Yeah, it reminded me of.
You remember
it reminded
Cinderella
me of
Man?
Yes.
I believe it was that fighter, Max Baer, the guy that he fought, was in a fight, and I think it was him that like got knocked around, and he sat down. And he's like, "I see 3 of them out there," and the cornerman said, "Hit the one in the middle." And so
It's interesting. It's like that may well be true, but there's a version of that story in every sport.
yeah, right,
There's one in soccer. There's a famous story of manager Graham Souness and the player Neil Ruddock, who got knocked unconscious in the match, and like regained consciousness and was like completely disoriented. And Graham Souness said one of the coaches said, "We can't put Neil out. He doesn't know who he is." And Graham Souness replied, "Tell him he's Pele and put him back on." And I think it's the same story, right? Just
But what I also like is at the end of the second round when he throws the one punch that gives Drago a cut, and you have the great, Tony Burton coming in, Duke coming in and pushing that guy up against the
Apparently
ropes.
for real, as
Apparently
we
for
found out.
real.
in that interview.
And he's always taking his wet sponge and throwing droplets of
He's a
water on
committed
everybody.
guy.
He's so good. But when he gets Rocky in the corner and he's telling him, you see, you cut him. You hurt him. He's not a machine. He's a man. Again, the earnestness.
Yeah.
He is so completely present in the moment, and the music's dun 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 dun, and it's building. And then you go into everything we were just talking about as far as the montage, the interfades, the fast cuts. like now we're like you said, we're on a level of substance or style over substance.
Style over
Yeah.
substance. But you're absolutely right, and to me, that moment, the hit the one in the middle is the culmination of Paulie makes good,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Right.
It's like not only is he now emotionally
He
open,
contributes
he's useful.
at
He
ringside.
contributes.
Yeah.
And it was a real shame when you get to the ultimate director's cut that they, for some reason, maybe they thought it was embarrassing, they cut Tony Burton repeating that.
Yeah.
Because that's it's not just, I mean, yeah, they'd be like, oh, it's a stupid punchline. Yes, but that's the first contribution Paulie's ever made
Right.
in the ring. And it's really, and like, the fact that, you know, they're actually following Paulie's advice.
Yeah.
And also, it builds the contrast, because in one corner, you've got a guy, you know, you've got an authoritarian regime, where it's like, we have a plan, do what we told you,
Mhm.
and if you don't, you're in trouble. In the Rocky corner, it's a democracy.
Right. Yeah.
It's like, I vote, hit the one in the
Yeah.
middle. I vote, hit the one in the middle. He
You
goes
hit
up and
the
hits
one in the middle.
So I think you can over tinker with stuff and ruin it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a new box of cinematic tricks for this match, and I really liked it.
Well, and there was, you know, this is where we start getting into
Propaganda land.
well, I'm thinking in terms of filming, because this is the film where they did a lot of just actually hitting each other.
Why don't we try
You know,
hitting each other?
it wasn't the best idea for Stallone, because Dolph Lundgren hit him in the chest so hard that night he started having heart palpitations and had to be put on an airplane, flown at low altitude so that he didn't die.
And John G. Avildsen got a camera and immediately filmed it. I was gonna say, like, again, speaking of Avildsen and like not wanting him to give him too much credit, but the pounding that Rocky receives in this fight needs to be addressed in the next film.
Oh yeah.
Like, there's no way around that. I think this is one instance where they forced Avildsen into a writing corner. You know what I mean?
Right.
And he actually responded in a reasonable way, because the pummeling you're seeing cannot go unremarked.
Well, and I have a note here that says, because my note is, thank God there wasn't a 10 knockdown rule. Because
right,
usually there's a 3 knockdown rule.
right.
And Rocky goes to the mat like 10 times, at least that I see on screen. And then
it's unsanctioned.
And then it's implied that he goes down like another 2 or 3 times.
They're in international waters, basically,
Right.
aren't they? There's like, all bets are off.
But that's the thing. I mean, that's the thing about all these movies and about the character of Rocky, is it's all about you know, and he's even saying it in later movies of you know, how much can you take and keep going forward, and the heart of a fighter, and you know, it's just always ever present. And so
Mhm.
you know, Dolph Lundgren is, I mean, he's one of the giant trees that Rocky Balboa just has to keep chopping at, you know,
Right, yeah.
until he eventually falls. And
we also skipped over the fact that he's pumped up with steroids.
Right.
We saw in one of the montages, which we kind of knew, but was confirmed.
well, and that's
for
again,
us.
that's like, it goes back to not exactly science versus nature, but like the idea of
Science fiction versus
right, the idea that's completely ridiculous, but the idea that an athlete with a giant heart can overcome an athlete who's cheating, which is really
Mhm.
not true.
No, I mean, it's... Yeah, and I guess you sort of see the impetus that... It's interesting, like, when you think about over these films and, like, when does the outcome matter? And in a couple of movies, the outcome doesn't matter, and in a few it does. And here it does, because the future of
Right.
the West is at stake.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's made very clear. If Rocky loses this, then we lose a chance to end the Cold War.
Right.
That's made very clear through Gorbachev, through the crowd chanting his name, after starting off
But
booing
and this
him.
this is like the first movie that chooses to use different music as the montage music for the fight.
Mm,
And I really love the music. It's
Yeah.
called War.
Oh, I know. I've been running to it for the last 2 weeks.
Exactly. That's amazing.
New record times, I'll tell you.
Yeah. And everything just coalesces in this fight in a way that is so overwhelmingly satisfying.
Yes, absolutely. And we, it, and then there's what I would call flim flam, which is which is repeated cutaways to Rocky Jr. with his school friends at home,
Right.
and a spinning robot dressed as Santa in the background. I'm like, they're basically cutting away to another movie.
Yeah.
and then this is where we get our wrestling moment. The politician comes down from the balcony
Right.
and berates Drago in his corner, and Drago then lifts him and throws him out of the ring.
Yes.
Again, WWE.
WWF at that time.
WWF at that time. WWE for the Ultimate Director's Cut.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's an interesting thing, too.
It is.
There is something inherently dramatic about a Russian athlete looking up at the premiere and saying, I fight for me. For me.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, that, like, he is going to Siberia.
This is what, to me, this is where the biggest suspension of disbelief comes. Bearing in mind that I just mentioned there's a robot dressed as Santa, who apparently is looking after 5 children.
Right.
I'm sure there's an off-screen housekeeper, but we see no evidence.
It's that
of
same
on
housekeeper from Rocky 3.
Yeah. Like, Rocky's never shown any interest in geopolitics, and now suddenly he's all over it.
I also have a note here, Tom, that speech was improvised.
I believe that, because that feels more like Stallone than Rocky.
Yeah, right.
I mean, it goes without saying. Rocky is barely literate.
Yeah,
in the first movie.
they're the same person at this point.
Well, I don't know. I think they were the same person in 3, and now they've gone back to being a limbo between the two. But here, definitely, it's Stallone.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this feels more original flavor Rocky than Rocky 3 to me. But that's the point of Rocky 3, so I don't mind.
Right.
It's not the point of Rocky 5.
No.
That's why I do mind,
Yeah.
because that's not Rocky either. Yeah, that's he makes that speech. Final freeze frame is a jingoistic image of the flag behind Rocky. So it's not about the
it's
man
different,
anymore,
though.
it's about the nation.
The actual last shot is a freeze frame close up on his face with the flag behind him.
Yeah.
But then at the end credits, you have that weird black and white, like, fading out of him being lifted up with the flag on his back.
But it's like, man and nation.
Yes, are one and the
indivisible.
same.
Yeah.
And that's
then,
Rocky 4.
And more, very brief credit checks. I know we've still got things to talk about. Black and white photo still recap of the movie.
My last note is photos of what you just saw in black and white.
Yeah. We've already had I wrote the same thing. I said we've already had a recap in this movie covering this very territory.
Exactly.
But it also thought that, like, maybe it's not just music videos that are influencing his style. Maybe, like, 80s TV as well, because this looks like the end of an episode of, Hill Street Blues or something.
Yeah, right.
Or Magnum, where you recap the entire episode. I love the fact that they have to thank a union in the credits. Like, they thank a camera union, and I love the irony of that.
That's great.
Like, one of the most anti-socialist movies has to thank a union in the credits. And that's it, really. That's all I have. Oh yeah, I like that. I like that they give James Brown his official title, the Godfather
of Soul. Yeah.
No less is deserved.
Yep.
Okay,
I
director's cut.
fucking love this movie.
I know you do.
It's so good.
I know.
Okay, so
for last Nearly's of the director's cut.
It's not a first and first most. Well, I do.
It's a last
I
and
do
last
have a
Nearly's.
first and first mostly's for what I think about
Me too.
the recut overall.
Go ahead.
Overall, it's a very interesting movie,
Yes.
and I see stuff within it that it's inexplicable to me that it wasn't in the original movie.
Yes.
But overall, there's no way you can look at that movie and think that you can retroactively make what we have described as a perfect 1985 of the moment movie into a 1970s movie. You made a 1985 movie. That's what it is. And trying to restructure it into something else actually doesn't work for it. Now, I don't mean that to sound more pejorative than I want it to, because it's still a really enjoyable movie and it's really interesting.
Yeah.
But there is a magic elixir about the 1985-ness of Rocky IV, and that's just where that movie sits. That's the movie you made.
I don't disagree with any of that. I have a similar ambivalence. So, I think, first of all, unlike many director's cuts, I think this is a really legitimate undertaking.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was a COVID-mandated director's cut.
Right.
He had the time and the resources, the studio backing to recut one of his movies. That's enough. More importantly, he had the footage.
Yeah.
And the same cannot be said of another COVID-mandated cut of a famous sequel, The Godfather Part 3. They had nothing. All they could do was
reorganize it. Yeah.
And it's high, as we've discussed, it's high quality footage.
Yeah.
So, on those terms, I'm absolutely fine with it. I think it's I mean, whether you, and this is not good or bad, but just true. It's a reflection of where his head is as a director now.
Mm-hmm.
And what he's done is he's kind of made a movie in a modern independent movie style.
Yes, right.
And also, and I think you pointed this out when we went to see it, he kind of muted the colors to make it look like it was a 70s
He did,
movie.
yeah.
So basically, you're missing out the 80s.
So he's muted out color. He's added black and white into certain sections.
So you're actively removing the 80s from the paradigm. And I think that's interesting. That makes it an interesting viewing experience. Of course, you enter into all the same problems you do with belated director's cuts, as it feels inauthentic.
Mm-hmm.
It's, ahistorical. It loses that sense of the historical moment that it's from.
Right.
Also, specific to Stallone, we've commented before that he cannot leave his own properties alone.
Right.
And he gave himself away in that interview he gave where he said, if MGM hadn't stopped me, I'd have still been editing
exactly.
this. And there is evidence
What
of
did he say? He was
over-tinkering
working
to a
on it?
massive degree.
Was he working on it for 9 months, he said?
Yeah.
And I think we both said at the time, you probably could have stopped at 6 months.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's times, we've spoken to it already. There are times he's taking out these little spiteful cuts here and there.
Mm-hmm.
It's like Richard Donner on this in the
Donner
Superman
cut.
cuts. Yeah. It's like just taking out the punchlines and things that you're embarrassed by. You don't need to do that. Sometimes you just need to leave it alone. And something that you pointed out that I thought fascinating was that he has this entirely subjective idea about what is 80s about this movie.
Mm-hmm.
And if it's associated with something that he is now interested in as a director, it will stay in the movie, even if it's the most 80s thing in the movie.
Like the car ride montage.
Right, because you were like, I remember you turning to me before, it's like, this isn't going to make it into the movie.
Yeah.
If Seiko's gone, this is definitely gone. But
and then right before that
you
scene was started,
as I later did,
at the same
it includes
time,
a recap montage.
Yeah. At the same
which
time,
is what
we
he's all
both
about now.
we both realized no, Stallone loves that, so there's no fucking way it's leaving.
But arguably the most 80s part of the movie as well.
Of course.
So, it's all a little bit.
But again, that's where he tries to de-80s it by putting it in black and white.
Right. Yeah. So those are my sort of general kind of feelings about it. You know, it's more legitimate than a director's cut usually is,
Right.
but falls victim to all the same problems.
Well, and
Not least the ego of the man doing
right,
it,
and
which is also true with the Godfather.
we talked a
Code.
little bit about this, the parts that work, the scene in the kitchen between Rocky and Adrian after deciding, or not deciding, but after, you know, Apollo's saying, I want to fight this man, and that's a really good scene. But the scene that like blows all other scenes out of the water is the funeral scene, and with Duke
Right.
and Rocky speaking at Apollo's funeral, it's so good. I can't possibly imagine what he was thinking not putting it in the first place.
And my operational theory is that he didn't want to be seen crying on screen. That was
That's
it.
crazy.
That's the only
though.
thing I can think of. Yeah. The scene that really blew me away, and there were many. And I don't understand why this wasn't in the movie, because it says what you're trying to say even then better than it does in the actual movie.
Mhm.
Is when Creed first approaches Rocky to say, I'm thinking about doing this fight with Drago,
Right.
this Goodwill fight. And their characters feel way more authentic than they do in the scenes that were in the original cut. Particularly with regards to politics. Because Creed starts to sort of, you know, he's the gift of the gab, so he starts to go off. He's saying, oh, it's just a propaganda machine, you know, it's the Russian, it's all politics. And they cut to Rocky, and he has this blank look on his face.
Right. Exactly.
And that's a much better introduction to this guy who's like fumbling his way through geopolitics. So I thought that scene was
and then
superb
you know
as well.
and then the other problem it has is that he's using different angles and different cuts for certain scenes. There's a great joke I was referencing earlier about Apollo's press conference, and he's, you know, you don't really think you're going to win, right? And in the theatrical version, it's far more close up. You have you know, a camera to the left on Apollo. And in the recut, it's all taken back. It's a wide shot.
Yeah.
And he used a cut. So when he says, you know, get that heavy bag with eyeballs in the ring, and I'm going to beat him right now, chump, and all this, and like the brouhaha starts. And then he decides he's going to leave the press conference, and he turns to Rocky and he goes, how'd I do? And he goes, it was a little loud for my taste. He goes, but good, right? And he's like, oh, yeah. And it's a great joke.
Yeah.
It lands perfectly. But the take he chooses in this new cut is not as good a take.
Right.
And
he's second guessing himself where he doesn't need to. And that's true as well. Like
there's a lot of those in the movie. In the recut.
So many.
There's a lot of that
right
kind
from
of
the
thing.
beginning,
Yeah.
because we choose not to follow the usual pickup. Instead, we start in the middle of Rocky 3.
Mm-hmm.
In this cut.
Yeah.
I mean, I the joy it gave me when the movie started and you went, this is the first fight. The fact that you could recognize it after not even a second is amazing to me. But also the fact that you could distinguish between those two fights. But also just the fact that like you're straight up, like we were sort of like, what's going to be taken out, what's going to be left in, and immediately you're like, how far back are we going?
Exactly.
It's the middle of Rocky 3.
Because we go from that, and the next thing you know, you see Apollo in his pool, and and we both went, oh my god,
we're in the pool already with the
so
Labradors.
much.
So
Oh.
it's yeah,
But
it's fascinating.
it's without question, it is worthy of a viewing. It is certainly, I'll use the word again, it's an earnest attempt at trying to do something different with that movie. Ultimately, it doesn't work for me. I would just like to see a recut of the things that work best in that movie added to Rocky IV as it is.
Godfather Saga it.
Yeah.
Or Rocky Saga. You could do a Rocky Saga.
There you go.
Just stay inside.
Oh, my goodness. Well, I think we did it.
Oh, yeah, this was a Rocky Saga for sure.
I mean, this podcast is a good bit longer than Rocky IV itself. So
yes,
I think that speaks to the quality of the movie and why I have it ranked so high, frankly.
And even if you put the new footage from the Ultimate Director's Cut in here, this podcast is still probably longer than that.
Exactly. We had to, though. Thank you.
I knew it was going to happen.
Yeah, I say thank you to everyone for sticking with us.
It was a foregone conclusion.
All right.
That's why I brought sandwiches.
I mean, yeah, we're going to have a doodle-doodle-doodle-doodle-doodle-doo. We'll have a little intermission break in the middle of the podcast.
We'll gone with the wind this shit.
Yeah, exactly. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Rocky IV. If you have something to add, if we missed something, man...
Then you know this movie better than we both do.
So I was just gonna say that this movie so much better than us. I can hardly believe it. But by all means, please, you send us an email. Find us on Facebook.
There might be some people who don't like this movie quite as much as we do.
Exactly.
And I just want to say to those people, that's fine. Not only is it your right, it is also your privilege. Because you're a free American.
As this movie,
not one of them commies.
As this movie will point out to you. Find us on Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter. Send us an email to everythingsequal@gmail.com. For Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions, Michael Shantz here of the How Dare You Awards. Hit 'em, Tom.
Who am I? I'm the unsilent majority, big mouth.
I love that line. It's so ridiculous.
It's the big mouth that makes it.
It's ridiculous. All right, take care, everybody. The Loathsome Rocky V.